Good evening, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Thank you for coming back to my channel yet again, or for the very first time. Kemi Badenoch is the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition, the Conservative Unionist Party. Mrs. Badenoch, a few days, waded into this row between politicians and the judiciary. And here she concurs with Sir Keir Starmer, who's Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. They denounced the ruling by a judge allowing a Palestinian family to have asylum in the United Kingdom on the scheme which was intended for Ukrainian refugees. So clearly they're going against the intendment of Parliament. Now, Lady Chief Justice Baroness Sue Carr, as in she's in charge of the civil division of law within England and Wales. I'm not sure about the whole United Kingdom. And she has publicly stood up for the judge without commenting on the rectitude or otherwise of the judicial decision, but saying that judges should not be verbally assailed by politicians, and reminding that the Constitutional Reform Act of 2005, which makes judicial independence sacrosanct, and say that politicians must not try to sway judicial rulings. Anyway, the judge has already been delivered, but of course there could be an appeal, so this could be a contributory factor in it being overturned or not. It's not overturned. You might say, was that because the judges was minded to overturn it, but the judiciary dug their heels in for fear of being seen to cave in to political pressure? So it's an unseemly row. Now, I'm minded to disagree with the decision, though I have every sympathy with the Palestinians. I know what Craig Murray has. He was ambassador to Uzbekistan, the British ambassador there in the middle of the Blair years, and he said, 11,000 Ukrainian civilians killed in this war. It's horrendous. 11,000 out of a population of 40 million. 50,000 Gazans out of 2.5 million being killed. Therefore, the Gazan case for asylum is all this the principles applying to the a fortiori, and plus almost nobody else is taking them. So why on earth is it not given to the Palestinians? But anyway, judges are not to make those decisions. They are to interpret the law as fashioned by Parliament. If it's an absurdity or so on, some judges say, well, we leave that up to Parliament to correct or not. We are not legislators. We mustn't usurp the legislative role. But likewise, politicians mustn't intrude into the judicial sphere. And then policing the boundaries is tricky. That's actually up to the judiciary. But I accept that the learned judge would know far more about the law than I do. The legislation, I've not even read it, and whatever other principles there are, case law, things like that. So on we go. Yeah, so I think they should have refrained from attacking this particular ruling. I know it's important, and obviously politicians can change the law. Parliament is sovereign, but it does seem to undermine the principle of judicial independence. So to my knowledge, no legal action has ever been taken about anyone, well, a politician who has said this kind of thing. Are they not interfering in the judicial arena? Are judges interfering in the political arena? I don't think they are, actually. And judges are told not to do so. And admittedly, like Cherie Blair was a recorder, a very low level of judge, despite being a member of the Labour Party, having once been a parliamentary candidate, and obviously the wife of a Labour Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, as he is now. But, into the 1950s, people went from being MPs to being judges straight away. I'm not sure they went right the other way around, and that would be considered deeply inapposite these days. It would be seen to undermine the independence of the judiciary. Remember the 1980s, the guidelines for judicial conduct is they must not speak to the media in case they said anything that could be interpreted or even misinterpreted as political bias, and so on. Anything that was to be contentious, just keep a low profile when they're out of court. Anyway, so now Robert Jenrick, who is a politician, he's the Shadow Justice Secretary. A Conservative says that politicians are allowed to publicly castigate judges' decisions, and so on, and that there's a phrase, judicial activism. I mean, I don't think either of them should have done it. But Kemi Badenoch is now saying the United Kingdom might have to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, or rather maybe repeal the Human Rights Act, which was passed in 2000, if memory serves, which transposes the European Convention on Human Rights into domestic law and allows judges within the United Kingdom, to have to interpret British law compatibly with the European Convention on Human Rights insofar as possible, accepting it might sometimes be impossible, in which case they issue that declaration of incompatibility. They leave it up to Parliament to amend, or they may choose not to make any amendment. So they might remove that and then passively make it easier to refuse asylum, to deport failed asylum seekers, other people in the United Kingdom illegally. And it is staggering the number of people who've been allowed to stay despite having committed fairly serious crimes. Now, I'm not for mass deportations if someone's been caught shoplifting even a few times, or traveling on the train without a ticket, of very minor things. And obviously the longer someone's been here, the less minded it would be to remove that person. About this tough talking from politicians as we get ridiculous results. For example, there's some people living in the United Kingdom for decades, or even born in the UK, assume they're British citizens and were British in all but the narrowest legal sense, and then can be deported decades later over some trivial misdemeanor. And that's obviously unjust and completely disproportionate. So this tough talk from Kemi Badenoch, I think it's partly because she's worried about being outflanked by Reform United Kingdom, Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, and they say that they would repeal the Human Rights Act and they would take decisive action. There'll be huge-scale deportations. There's this Trumpist rhetoric, and that's appealing to some former Conservative voters. So that's the real battle the Conservatives got to fight the next election. This is damage limitation, possibly clawing the way back, is to make sure they see off the challenge from Reform United Kingdom. They can't be out toughed by the Reform UK. But there's only so far that the Conservative Party can go in that direction without losing a lot of the centre ground. The centre ground has furthered the Conservative Party, partly over all these years of failure, disappointment about NHS waiting lists, sluggish economic growth, high inflation, constant lying, rising crime, and so on. Just failed, wokery. So some people will drift back, but the Conservative Unionist Party has obviously got no God-given right to be one of the duopoly parties. It is possible it could be pushed into third place. Just remember, for a very long time, it was Liberals and Conservatives, or Tories and Whigs before that. And the Whigs who grew into the Liberals, they were displaced as the second biggest party by Labour in 1922. And over a century later, they still haven't come back and look like they're nowhere near coming back, well behind the Conservatives in vote share and number of seats last time, even though it was annus mirabilis for the Liberal Democrats in 2024 under Sir Ed Davey. I don't think politicians should be publicly criticising judges like this. There are other ways they can deal with this to amend the law and get on and do it. The Conservative Party had 14 years to sort this out in government. Obviously, Labour's being even worse on this one. But even Sir Keir Starmer, a leftist lawyer himself, is agreeing that judges are making wrong decisions. Of course, to err is human. Of course, they're going to make it. They're going to get it wrong sometimes. I said, but sorry, we are interpreting the laws passed by you, legislators. So don't blame us for the legislation. And so judges are right to make decisions which they consider just and in accordance with the legislation, the case law. Popular, unpopular, doesn't matter. If it queers the pitch for a party's re-election campaign, don't care. If the gutter press savage you, you've got to just ignore that. Have a thick skin. Don't let it get to you. Make the right decision, and don't care how it goes down with the man on the street. This is not about public relations. It's not a popularity contest. Right. Thank you very much for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate to PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Goodbye.